Okay, good morning. So our next speaker is the brainchild behind those tables that you see every 4 years, showing that Yorkshire's performing better than most of the world at the Olympics. He's been to Rio, he's been to London, and he's most recently been to Paris, covering the Olympic Games. He works for the partner of our sports journalism programme, TalkSport. So please give a big Journalism and Media Week welcome to Michael Weadock.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be with you. And what I'm going to present over the next sort of 30 minutes is the story of TalkSport and the Olympic Games. And to present the story of TalkSport and the Olympic Games, I will rewind very briefly to my first time covering the Olympic Games, which was back in London in 2012. And it was actually not for TalkSport, it was for regional radio, it was for Yorkshire Radio. And you're probably much too young to remember the London 2012 Olympics, but there were lots of medalists from Yorkshire. And I was the first person, I think, who ever uttered the phrase, and I uttered it on the radio, so somewhere it's there for posterity, if Yorkshire was a country. And that got picked up by national and international media. So I was interviewed during the London 2012 Olympics by Chinese state television, for example. The BBC started including Yorkshire on their medal table, and we went to the Radio Awards early in 2013, and we won the award for Best Sports Coverage for our story, If Yorkshire Was a Country. Unfortunately, the radio station that I was working for at the time folded shortly after that, so it really was a highlight of the 10 years or so that they were broadcasting. I was quite fortunate, though, that I got offered another opportunity, and that opportunity was with TalkSport. And that came about quite fortuitously, actually, because the next big major sporting event after the London Olympics was the Glasgow Commonwealth Games in 2014. Now, I had plans to cover the Glasgow Commonwealth Games in 2014 for Yorkshire Radio. But with no Yorkshire Radio existing, there wasn't really much point in me getting overly involved in the Commonwealth Games. That said, I married a Glaswegian, and about 6 months before the Games, they held a media event in Glasgow where they invited all the accredited members of the media to come and have a look around the venues, meet some of the staff. I wasn't going to go. I didn't see the point because there was no radio station for me to broadcast on. But my wife, being a Glaswegian, said, look, we should go. We can go up to Glasgow. We can see the family. You never know who you might meet. And it was actually on a bus trip out to Celtic Park that I found myself sat next to a guy. He introduced himself. He was the head of live sport at TalkSport. He asked me what I was doing. I said, to be honest, for the Commonwealth Games, not a lot. He said, I know who you are. You're the guy from If Yorkshire Was a Country. I went, yep, that's me. He said, would you like to cover the Commonwealth Games for TalkSport? Essentially, we're spending all of our money that summer on covering the men's FIFA World Cup in Brazil. We have no cash left for the Commonwealth Games, but we do need someone there. And from the sounds of it, you've got accommodation sorted that we don't have to pay for. So for the grand sum of £50 a day, we shook hands on a deal. I have to say, by the time we actually got around to the Commonwealth Games in 2014, they had raised that fee to £100 a day, based on the fact that I wouldn't be working for anybody else. I was exclusive to TalkSport. So that was my entry point into the Games. Following Glasgow, I went to Rio in 2016 and had 3 weeks in Brazil covering the Olympic Games there. I went to Gold Coast in Australia for the Commonwealth Games in 2018. For the delayed Olympic Games and Paralympic Games in Tokyo in 2021, I covered that at home or in the studios in London. And then obviously Paris sort of came onto the agenda after the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Now, just to let you know that the BBC have essentially owned Olympic broadcasting in this country, certainly on television and on radio, for about the last 100 years. ITV, in terms of TV, have broadcast some Olympic Games coverage, but commercial radio have never broadcast the Olympic Games before. And when you get to the Olympic Games, if you are a rights-holding broadcaster, which is what the BBC are, that brings you a number of privileges. That means you can go into venues, you can record commentary, broadcast live commentary, record interviews, have people in the venues. If you're a non-rights-holding broadcaster, as I always have been for TalkSport, That meant I wasn't allowed to do any broadcasting inside any of the venues. So they literally, if you want to interview a medal-winning athlete, you literally have to walk with them outside of the venue and outside of the security perimeter. So you need good relationships with the athletes in order to convince them to do that. So I was expecting Paris was going to be a trip to the Olympics as a non-rights holding broadcaster. That was until I read an annual report by Warner Brothers Discovery, which detailed as the main Europe-wide rights holder that they had subcontracted, sub-licensed the broadcast rights to the BBC. Now for television, this was exclusive. So there was no way ITV or Sky could get involved. But there was a very small bit of detail at the bottom, and it mentioned that the radio rights were non-exclusive. So I thought to myself, I should take this information to TalkSport and tell them that they could buy the rights to the Olympic Games. I travelled down to London, did a presentation. This was the first page on my presentation. They listened to my presentation, thanked me for my presentation, and said they weren't interested. A couple of weeks later, I got a phone call from them, and they said, actually, we might be interested, because we've looked at the dates. The Men's European Football Championship ends. We've got 3 weeks before the Premier League football season begins. The Olympics would fit nicely into that. So I put them in touch with Warner Brothers Discovery, the pan-European rights holders, and they began negotiations to see if they could get rights for the Olympic Games. Remember, no UK commercial radio station had ever done that before. And eventually, I got a phone call in July 2023, so a year out from the Games. The head of live sport at TalkSport said to me, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Yes." "We've only gone and bloody done it. We've bought the rights to the Olympics." I was sitting down. I took a gulp, and they said, "And we need you to organise it. You are our Olympics correspondent. You've covered the Olympic Games. If you know TalkSport, national radio station, very heavily football focused, lots of boxing, lots of rugby union, lots of cricket, not a lot of athletics, not a lot of cycling, not a lot of gymnastics, never any taekwondo, no judo, very little swimming." They had no one in the building that had any knowledge of these sports, the people that did these sports, no knowledge of how the Olympics was run. And so it was that I was given a year to try and organise the Olympics. So the first thing we needed to do was work out what our values were going to be on air. How were we going to present the Olympic Games on TalkSport and TalkSport 2? And we worked out that these would be our values: planning, preparation, education, storytelling, and opportunity. So we knew that Team GB, and they would be our main focus, were going to take around 350 athletes. So as part of my planning, as each sport was announced and the athletes were named, I went away and produced biographies of all of these different athletes. And usually I would go and meet all of the athletes and record interviews with them as well. We knew that there would be around 20 sports that Team GB would take part in, 30 sports in total in the Olympics. We knew that we would have about 270 hours to fill across TalkSport and TalkSport 2. Quite a lot of radio. We also knew that our audience wouldn't know a lot about all of those sports that I just named. So we looked at education, and we realised that with a year to go, we would have to start telling the audience about some of those athletes that we knew by the time the Olympic Games came around, people would be talking about, would be on the front pages of newspapers, would be leading news bulletins. Storytelling was important. We knew that a lot of these athletes had really good stories, and we knew that they were very keen to try and tell those stories because TalkSport was a brand new audience for them. It was a new outlet, somewhere they'd never been before. And we also knew internally that there was this once-in-a-lifetime broadcast opportunity for all involved. And one of the things we set out right at the start was by saying that we wanted to broadcast the Olympic Games using our people at TalkSport. So what we didn't want to do was go and get lots of people that maybe had worked for the BBC in the past. We didn't want to get the BBC commentators from the Sydney Games of 2000. We wanted to do it with our own people. So we had to put this out to our commentators and reporters and say, look, you guys do cricket, you do football, you do rugby. How do you fancy doing rowing? Who wants to be a gymnastics commentator? We identified 12 key sports, because we knew with our broadcast team and the way that we were going to do it, that we were not going to be able to cover everything. So we worked out and did some research on what we thought our audience would be most interested in. So rugby sevens fits perfectly. TalkSport broadcast a lot of rugby league and a lot of rugby union. Tennis, TalkSport broadcast quite a lot of tennis commentary. Likewise, golf. A lot of people thought, golf, is that really an Olympic sport? But for our audience, we knew that golf would be a sport that they knew and that they would know the people taking part. Huge horse racing audience at TalkSport, so we put equestrian on the list. And then we looked at some of the other sports that we knew that Team GB would do well in, and we also then looked at some of the sports that we knew rated well in terms of audiences. So very much in this country, track and field athletics is the focus of the Olympics in week 2. Swimming is the focus of the Olympics in week 1. So we decided that we would focus on these 12 sports. And that's not to say we didn't cover the other sports. We absolutely did. So in the build-up to the games, we put a diary together of things that we thought might be of interest. And you'll see the colour coding down the side. We had gold, silver, and bronze events. Where did we get that idea from? The gold events, we decided, were things that we had to have a presence at. We had to be seen at. We had to go and meet the athletes. So things like the British Swimming Championships was a great opportunity to get ourselves in front of Adam Peaty, who was going to be one of the standout Team GB stars. We knew, obviously, there were other things that were going to be going on, like the Men's European Gymnastics Championships. There wasn't a budget for us to go out there, but we knew, we put it as a bronze event, it was something we should keep across because it was all part of the qualification. And so we put this diary together, and what Team GB do as well is they do team announcements. So every sport will have its own day where they announce the team, and we as broadcasters had an opportunity to go down there and interview some of the athletes concerned. And what we did as well when we were doing that with a lot of the sports that perhaps people, our audience, didn't know too much about, is we would spend time with the athletes, recording them, doing how-to guides. So, for example, I went over to Manchester, wrong side of the Pennines, I grant you. I went to the National Taekwondo Centre. They named 4 Taekwondo athletes, so I went and recorded interviews with the 4 Taekwondo athletes, and I also got them all to record how Taekwondo works. Do you know what a ganjon is? Probably not, if you're a TalkSport listener. But we recorded all of these profile pieces with all the athletes, and we recorded all these kind of how the sport works. And we used all of them, we packaged them up, edited them tightly, and we used them all during the Olympic Games because we had that 270 hours to fill. And then obviously as we got closer, some gold announcements there. The 10 team announcements that we had to cover in that first week of July were all of our key sport team announcements. So this is where, by the time we got on air in Paris, we essentially had an interview with every member of the travelling team, barring a handful. We knew that athletics was going to be one of our key sports when we got to Paris as well. And so being at the British Championships, being at the Olympic trials was very important. And then there were other briefings and press conferences that we knew we had to attend as things got closer to the opening ceremony on Friday, the 26th of July. And I can tell you, that was a date that was ringed in my diary because I knew by Friday the 26th of July we would have to get everything ready. So a few landmarks in between us finding out we had the rights in July 2023. We announced the rights publicly in February 2024, so 6 months out. I'd obviously had 6-7 months of knowledge, and we'd done 6 or 7 months worth of work when they got publicly announced. It caused a bit of a stir. Certainly amongst people that I know that worked at the BBC, they could not believe that TalkSport had got the rights to the Olympics. My phone went ballistic. Everyone I'd ever met, everyone that had ever interacted with me on social media, every sports commentator, reporter, journalist that had ever seen a tweet that I'd ever put out, got in contact with me. Everybody wanted to work on the Olympic Games for TalkSport. I got a message on LinkedIn from a guy who said, I'm a chartered surveyor by day, but I quite like sport, and I wondered whether you'd had any opportunities with TalkSport to see if I could become one of the commentators or reporters. That's how much interest there was. It was in all of the newspapers. We did a talent announcement shortly after that, and a former student at this university, as I've discovered today, Natalie Sawyer, who's in the centre of that picture, was announced as our main presenter, and she was going to be in Paris presenting our coverage every evening. We announced two key pundits, Steve Redgrave and Dame Kelly Holmes. So for those of you who don't know, so Steve Redgrave is a rower who won 5 consecutive gold medals at 5 consecutive Olympic Games. For a long time was the greatest British Olympian. Had worked for the BBC for a while, but hadn't done for quite a bit. Was a great coup to get him involved. Dame Kelly Holmes won 2 Olympic gold medals in Athens in 2004. Little story about getting Dame Kelly Holmes involved. We were struggling for a guest, actually, for our opening ceremony coverage. So we had a load of things planned, but we just didn't have a big name for the opening ceremony coverage. And we were scrapping around, throwing names out here, there, and everywhere. And I knew Kelly Holmes' PA, and I dropped her a message and said, "What's Kelly doing at the Olympics?" I presumed that she would have loads of work on, but I wondered whether she might be free for the night. 15 minutes later, bear in mind I'd sent this initial email about 9:30 at night, as the idea had hit me. Her PA contacted me and said, "Kelly has no work lined up for the Olympic Games. She has a few opportunities, but yes, she'd love to join Talk Sport for the Olympic Games." And it was a really big coup for us, because one of the key medal hopes for Team GB was Keely Hodgkinson, who was in the 800 metres athletics, one of the events that Kelly Holmes had won, and the two of them have become friends, done a documentary together. So to have Kelly Holmes on our team, and it was all signed and sealed within the week, was fantastic. We also signed up Daley Thompson and Tessa Sanderson. These are names that I'm not expecting most people in this room to know automatically, but they were both Olympic gold medalists in 1984. So it was the 40th anniversary of the Los Angeles Olympics. Both legendary names in the world of track and field. And one of the things we hoped to do was at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, the 3 track and field gold medalists were Daley Thompson, Tessa Sanderson, and Seb Coe. Now, Seb Coe is the man that led the bid for the London Olympics, delivered the London Olympics. He is now president of World Athletics and is currently running to be the president of the International Olympic Committee. And I have quite a good relationship with Seb Coe and a very good relationship with his media guy. And so one of my ambitions during the Games was to get Seb Coe to join us for one of the sessions of athletics as a co-commentator and reunite him with his 2 other track and field medalists from 40 years before. And we did it. One of the things I was really keen to do when we talked about talent and the lineup was to try and get a fresh bunch of pundits, because a lot of the Olympic pundits that you see on the BBC, to put it brutally, have been there a long time. And we wanted people that we thought were going to be relevant, new, fresh, give different ideas. And so we brought in Adam Jamili for athletics. And Adam was actually, right up until the team announcement, was still actually trying to qualify for the Games. We got into a bit of a bidding war with Eurosport over Adam Jamili, and we won the race to hire Adam Jamili because we gave him the time to decide whether he was still going to try and qualify for the Olympic Games. Eurosport wanted to get him signed up. He still thought he had a chance of getting in the relay team. So we said, look, we will wait for you. And I went to the Olympic trials in Manchester, and he was there in his jeans, so he wasn't going to be competing. And I looked at him and I said, "Is this good news for Talk Sport that you're not competing this weekend?" And he went, "It is good news for Talk Sport that I'm not going to be competing this weekend. I am going to come and do the radio." And we lined up a bunch of pundits, world champions, Olympic medalists, Commonwealth Games medalists, and people there that you can see on the screen. And then we had to put together the lead commentators, what the Americans would call the play-by-play commentators. And again, going back to what I said, we wanted our own names. And so Nigel Adderley is a name very familiar with TalkSport audiences, a football commentator by rights. So he was our athletics commentator. Vaishali and John Anderson, again, known for doing football coverage and other sports, but swimming. And again, there you can go down the list. Graham Wilgoss is the regular cycling correspondent at TalkSport, so it made sense for him to be the cycling commentator. And All of those people on your screen, other than Nigel Adderley, did all of their commentary from London. So one of the reasons that we were able to deliver the Olympic Games in the way that we did was because if COVID had taught us anything, it taught us that we could do things what we call off-tube, so off the monitor. So most of the commentators actually commentated on their sport in London. So they would have the monitors in front of them, they would have the sound effects from the venues, they would have all the graphics, they would have all the information feed, but we didn't have to pay for them all to be in Paris and all the associated expenses with that. That was the only way we could do it with the budget. And in fact, the only two sports we did on site in Paris was athletics and boxing. We did have 4 of us who went out there, 4 roving reporters. Myself in the middle there at the athletics, my colleague John Cushing, who co-organised the Olympics with me, Katie Shanahan, who's a reporter and presenter at TalkSport, and we brought Joe Ankier in. And Joe does a lot of boxing reporting and is a former British athlete herself, so it made sense for her to do some athletics and to do boxing. So boxing was her main sport. So we all had our main sports. Mine was athletics, so I did all the athletics evening interviews. Katie did a lot of the swimming and hockey, because she's a former England hockey international. John was at the rowing and canoeing a lot of the time, and Joe did the morning athletics and the boxing. But the Olympic Games is essentially 30 world championships all taking place simultaneously. So we all had to be agile, and we all had to be prepared to go anywhere and do anything. So one of the sports that I did that's not actually on that list is tennis. Now, despite all the planning that we did, we hadn't really built in the fact that this was going to be Andy Murray's last ever tennis tournament. So Andy Murray was going to play his last ever professional tennis match at the Olympic Games, where he was a 2-time Olympic champion. We thought that they would get through the first round, so we hadn't really come up with a plan to have much coverage of that first round. We had someone looking after it in London who was across it. We didn't have anyone that was going to be at Roland Garros at the venue. So the plan, and the reason we had 4 reporters, just to rewind slightly, was we worked out with 4 of us, we could be at every session of those 12 major sports that we identified. Plus, we'd spent a year plotting where we thought Team GB were going to win the medals, and we'd worked out, and I'll show you a planner in a moment, that between 4 of us, we could be at every one of those medals, barring the sailing, which was 4 hours away in Marseille, and the shooting, which was 2 hours away in Châteauroux. So we worked out between 4 of us we could get everything covered, but we hadn't got a plan to cover Andy Murray. And it was me that actually got the phone call to say, it looks like Andy Murray and his partner Dan Evans are going to lose this match. I'd never commentated on tennis before in my life, but I was the closest person to Roland Garros, where the tennis was held. And so they said to me, you've got to get to Roland Garros as quick as you can. I didn't have a commentary position because we hadn't booked commentary positions other than the boxing and the athletics. So I literally sat in the crowd. And by the time I got in and sat down, Andy Murray and Dan Evans were facing 5 match points. They said to me, we're going to come to you, describe the 5 match points, and then hand over back to the presenter in London, go and get an interview with Andy Murray. I thought to myself, I can do that. 15, 20 minutes of tennis commentary. I can bring up Andy Murray's Wikipedia profile, explain what he's won in the past. I knew he'd won a couple of medals. I'd interviewed him a couple of times. I thought, yeah, I can do 15, 20 minutes of commentary. Andy Murray and Dan Evans saved 9 match points in that game. An hour and a half later, I was still commentating on the blooming tennis, on my own, with no one alongside me, and they did eventually win that match. So that's what you need to be with the Olympics. You need to be a little bit agile. So we had daily coverage from 8 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, and sometimes we overran because some of the boxing and things went on a little bit later. A few pictures at the bottom from some of the athletics. So I mentioned Kelly Holmes and Keely Hodgkinson, who did win a 100 metres gold medal. Obviously, some of the other pictures there from the athletics. The other picture there that I mentioned is Daley Thompson, Tessa Sanderson and Seb Coe. We did get our reunited. We reunited them together. And Adam Jamili, who I mentioned, was our athletics co-commentator there with Katarina Johnson-Thompson. The pair of them were childhood friends, competed at their first Olympic Games together in 2012. And what was great about Adam was not only did he come and become our athletics co-commentator, but he was keen as a broadcaster to go and do interviews and things. So it made sense for him to go and do the interview with Katarina Johnson-Thompson. So we had a plan pretty much for every hour of every day in advance of the Olympics. And one of my jobs every night was to send this planning document out. And you'll see on the planning document here everything that's going on. So that's the plan for the 8 till 10 Olympics breakfast show. So I started my day at Team GB House, where I was there to interview Bryony Page, who won a gold medal in trampoline, and to record some preview interviews with the skateboarders. So people like Sky Brown and Andy McDonald, who was 51. The highlighted bits are some of that audio that we had pre-prepared and gone out and cut. So, for example, you probably don't know what skeet shooting is, but we knew that Amber Rutter was a fantastic story. She'd given birth 4 months before the Olympics. She'd missed the previous Olympics because she contracted COVID. We thought she was going to win a medal, and she did. She won a silver medal. Should have been a gold if they had VAR in shooting. It would have probably still be going on. So we'd gone and met Amber, and we got her to explain what skeet shooting is, describe it all for us, and we cut these pieces. Again, dressage. The TalkSport audience, the boxing fans, the football fans, we thought they probably don't quite know how dressage works. So we went and interviewed Carl Hester, who was, I think, competing at his 5th or 6th Olympic Games, and he talked about how dressage works for me. Louis Hinchliffe, young sprinter from Great Britain, coached by an Olympic legend, Carl Lewis. I managed to get an interview with Carl Lewis in Manchester at the British Championships, the Olympic trials. And so we had an interview with Carl Lewis all about this young protege. And so you can see down here, we had a plan for the 10 till 2 show. Again, explainers about the sailing. And we had everything detailed down here. And in the middle column was who was going to be covering it. So Ian Danter was going to be the commentator. Steve Redgrave was going to be the pundit. And John Cushing was going to be the reporter on the ground in Paris at the rowing venue. And so we put these plans together every day. And they changed every day as well, because we had to go where the story was. We had to be a little bit agile in it. And some of the things that we thought we might be covering in advance, sometimes that would change on the day as well. But we had this plan for every day. And then another plan that we did, we broke it down hour by hour by hour. And so here you go. You can see all the different sports and who was covering it and what they were going to be doing. And I'm conscious that there might be some need for questions. So what I'll do finally is just play for 3 or 4 minutes a little clip on what we did and how it sounded. So all that planning, all that preparation, that reading of the small print, and then we had 17 days to deliver the coverage. And this is what it sounded like.
From us on the River Seine now.
That's me.
The ignition of the Olympic torch. And for the 3rd time in its history, Paris is an Olympic city. And let the games begin.
And Antoine de France racing down the touchline, almost back inside, and France have taken the lead.
DuPont is on fire. Phenomenal scenes here.
The first gold medals of these Paris Games heading to the French men's sevens team. It is a golden start for France.
You're getting very close to the end. We're quite away from being the end. Five times in a row. It's not easy to come through that.
From the brink of defeat, Andy Murray and Dan Evans have extended the Scotsman's tennis career.
Alan Beattie is leading for Great Britain on the cusp of history, and he might just be fading. It's going to be incredibly close, and he's edged out.
These are happy tears because anyone that's had children, trying to have a family, but trying to get a balance in their work, this is what it's about.
Laura Collett and Co have got the job done. That is the first Team GB gold medal of this Olympic Games.
These are childhood dreams that you never think would actually be possible.
Pidcock is steaming clear. It's an extraordinary gold medal for Tom Pidcock.
Olympic silver medalist in canoe slalom, Adam Burgess.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Noah Williams and Tom Daly are the Olympic silver medalists.
I'm just really happy with everything that I've been able to achieve.
Sorry to tell you that it didn't go his way.
It just wasn't my day today, and unfortunately, this is the day where it really mattered.
Nathan Hales has won the gold medal in the men's trap shooting.
The result of a lot of hard work and training.
Britain look as if they're going to defend their title. From Tokyo, it's Duncan Scott, and he touches it
one that, is able to do this amazing sport. And I think, there's so many hundreds of people which I should cut off this medal and give to.
On the line.
Incredible racing from our British women.
I know that you wrote in a diary that you wanted to win an Olympic medal, and then you threw it away, and your dad kept it.
It's a good thing that he did, because I don't think manifestation counts if you throw it away, to be honest. I think you have to hold on to it, you have to treasure it, and you have to believe.
Silver medal for Team GB's Kieran Riley here at the BMX Freestyle.
I worked so hard just to get to the games.
Can GB deny them again? Evans into his return. It's gone long. The Americans have won. And so the curtain finally falls on Andy Murray's glory, scoring to his career.
Yeah, a really good goal, and maybe almost got the most out of myself, and it's been a good journey.
What a performance from Simone Biles. She has done it. That is her 6th gold medal, and she really is the goat.
I'm just ecstatic in my performances tonight.
My name's Amanda from the USA.
And we're here to see Simone Biles. What did you think?
One gold, everything we could ask for. She's huge. If you think Olympics, you think so.
Emily Craig and Imogen Blanchard, gold medalist for Great Britain.
Absolutely incredible road from these British women.
So far, 2 golds, 2 silvers, 2 bronze. We've got more medals than any other country on the rowing table at the moment.
Naomi Marshall joins some of the greatest names in Olympic history in winning a 4th gold medal. It is an absolutely astonishing achievement. They get away first time, Lyles with an excellent start. And Blixenville causing problems. Frank Curley also coming through. And Kashane Thompson, and it's Noah Lyles. Noah Lyles is the Olympic champion.
It's an amazing moment. I don't think it's completely sunk in, to be honest.
Novak Djokovic, with a forehand winner, has won the Olympic gold medal.
Emma Finucane brings it home for Team GB. It's a first gold medal in the velodrome.
So proud of us all. Wow, I'm really happy.
Wow, that is some way to kick things off in the velodrome for Team GB.
Kelly Hodgkinson is the Olympic champion.
And she is the pride of Britain right now.
She's just become Olympic champion. Let's give her a dig. Let's celebrate everything she's come into this year to do.
You feel that, I've been the best in the world.
She's 22. She could dominate this for a generation. Ellie Harrington, only the 4th Irish Olympian to ever retain an Olympic title. What a moment for Irish female boxing. Congratulations to Britain's Ellie Aldridge, a gold medal for Team GB in the women's kite final.
Can't believe it, and just happiness.
It's the inside line for Carly. Carly takes it on the line! It's a bronze medal for Jack Carly.
And Great Britain have won the gold medal in the boulder and leads. Toby Roberts, the 19-year-old from Surrey, with 155 points.
It is Nita against Shagari Richardson, and the Americans take the gold medal. But Great Britain do get the silver medal. Great Britain are amongst the medals. Darnell Hughes with an extraordinary final run there.
Come on, Kat, you can do this. 8 seconds is all we need. Down this home straight, the last 100 metres, let's go.
Johnson Thompson may end up catching hold. She crosses the line now, and we're looking at the clock. Tiam crosses the line, and I think she's done enough. And Katarina Johnson Thompson will finish in the silver.
I feel so lucky and so blessed I'm able to finish.
So there you go. I'm really proud of that, and the first edit of that I did was 22 minutes long. But I thought I'd try and chop it down to 5 minutes. So I'm conscious that a few people might have some questions.
So we'll get the mic out to ask questions. Just one before we get to the audience, Michael. Just in terms of your presentation, obviously one of the big things that we talk about a lot this week is being a journalist, but you've been a salesman, then an editor, and then a journalist, all in terms of covering this. And, what's that like to kind of manage that, but then also be conscious, you need to go and cover the tennis, and you've actually got to do the day job?
Yeah. It was tough because I was obviously brought in to get involved with the negotiations initially and then the planning of it. And the plan was always that when I got to Paris, that I was there to be a broadcaster, and that was got to be my main focus. And it didn't pan out like that, to be honest. That team of 4 reporters, I ended up managing the team. I mean, the WhatsApp group chat between the four of us is quite extensive. And don't want to betray confidences, but we had a couple of issues within the team. We had an illness issue with someone as well. And so I was a manager of people during the games, which was something that I've never really done, was brand new to me. And yeah, I spent an awful lot of time, and if I was to do it again, I would probably have quite liked to have someone else to have taken on that role. I think I would have been a better broadcaster if I'd just concentrated on the broadcasting. But we'd never done it before. We've obviously debriefed and learned some lessons. And that was the way it panned out. And I just kind of got on with it. So my last role every night was I would sit there and update those planners and send those emails out. And I was in the bar one night doing that with a beer at 10:30. I got the call that our studio in Paris had to be evacuated because of a tropical storm. And I was the first person they could get hold of. So they said, you've got to dial in. You've got 35 minutes. You just got to talk about the Olympics. Hopefully I've shown today that I'm able to do that. So,
And just like I say, as last one, those guys that you're bringing in as co-commentators, like Adrian Jamili, for example, have you got to then spend time teaching them a little bit about broadcasting before you stick them on air? Is that part of your responsibility in that as well?
yeah, we did. We were deliberate in the people that we chose. They were people that we knew and people that I was pretty confident about in terms of broadcasting. I've known Adam since 2010, 2011. I knew, and the research, and the radio station does lots of research and focus groups as these things are going on, and I know that our audience figures on TalkSport 2 were through the roof during the Olympic Games, and I know that the research that was ongoing, Adam Jamili rated really highly, and we are now talking with Adam about what his role going forward potentially might be with the radio station. We didn't do lots of specific training. I think a lot of people sort of learn on the job a little bit, but what we did was we paired everyone with really good broadcasters. So the names that you saw on that list, the likes of Nigel Adderley, Joe Shannon, Ian Danter, Georgie Heath, Charlotte Richardson, we knew that they were really good broadcasters and they would be able to lead these people through what for some of them was a first kind of broadcasting job. And unfortunately, Team GB didn't do particularly well in the hockey, which is why it sort of doesn't make the highlights reel. But I was really, really pleased with the hockey commentaries that we did with Charlotte and Georgie, because there's a lot of hockey matches, and Krista Cullen, who came and she won a gold medal in Rio in 2016. She came to be our co-commentator. I remember listening to the hockey commentaries, thinking, this sounds really good. This has really worked, the team of the three of them.
We've got any questions for Michael then?
Go on. Who could?
Hi, Michael. It seems from the outside that TalkSport likes to get on big, sort of bombastic characters with quite controversial opinions sometimes. Just wondering if that is an active decision by the station, and does it carry over to your work with the Olympics?
Is it an active decision by the station? Kind of above my pay grade in terms of their talent recruitment. But what I can say about that is that when we were putting the athletics team together, or the Olympics team together rather, we wanted to reflect the rest of the station. We didn't want to be an outlier. We didn't want to be a silo. So you're right in that they do like to employ these big personality names, a lot of them obviously ex-footballers or whatever. And we knew that we had to find the equivalent of Jamie O'Hara and Gabby Agbonlahor, for example, in the world of athletics or in the world of rowing. So we knew that we wanted to appoint people that had something to say that would fit into the overall style. So yeah, you're very perceptive in the way you've picked up on what the station tries to do and how we try to reflect that within our own sports.
Hi, Michael. So I'm just wondering as well, when you're looking to hire commentators, maybe people who aren't well known, you're trying to get people into the industry, what sort of skills are you looking for? And when they're handing you their CV, what are you looking for in that person?
Again, a little bit above my pay grade. I don't hire the commentators. I think if you're looking to become a lead commentator in sport, research is really important. And there's a lot of hours that you need to do before you get to the event. Certainly plenty more than I got to do before I commentated on Andy Murray and tennis for the first time. You need to just be a decent human being as well, because it can be quite a stressful situation sometimes as well. So, you know, I think you've got to just be aware it's sometimes not all about you, although, you know, you're the voice that's going on the radio. I think in total we had about 85, 90 people working on Talk Sport. Now, bear in mind there was 4 of us on the ground. That's a lot of people in the background who are doing their best to make you sound and make the station sound as good as possible. And I think the other thing I'd say as well, and this fits in obviously with my brief, is so many reporters and commentators I meet want to do football. And there's loads of work there for football, and, you know, it's glamorous and it's great and everyone wants to be a football commentator, but find your niche, find your specialism. So for me, it was about Olympics. And I know people that, you know, are the go-to person for basketball in the country, for example. So, you know, if ever there's a written article in the newspaper or a broadcast thing about basketball, he's the guy that they go to. They know that he is the leading standout expert in basketball. So, you know, if you've got a passion for taekwondo or judo, go away. I always find that the best bit of research that I do is going and meeting the people, and that's what we did. Obviously, we went and carried out those interviews, and sometimes you record a lot of that, and sometimes you just do a lot of that for background. So there were 2 athletes, 2 twins, Lena and Lavia Nielsen. They both got a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, and I knew them. I've got to know them both quite well, and I was like, right, that's one of the stories we want to tell during the Olympics coverage. But they had been victims is probably not the right word, but they'd been misrepresented or misreported in the past. And so they were not overly keen on revisiting the MS story. But because I'd got to know them and spent a lot of time planning with them to make sure that the story we told was accurate and representative, they agreed to do it. And actually, we spent more time working it out and planning it than we actually did with the recording. So just going away and getting to know the people in the sports or whatever it is you're covering is another big piece of advice.
Hi, Michael. We've seen the absolute vast majority of sports on there that you've been covering. As a sports journalist and also as someone who's covering the events yourself, how important is it before the Olympics to do your research on the different sports and familiarise yourself with the rules so you're more knowledgeable about those kind of things? Absolutely vital. And, you know, and it proved to be, when we were out there, the fact that we could be sent here, there, or everywhere. So there was a very short clip, and I'm not expecting you necessarily to remember it on the audio I played, where I was at the BMX freestyle. Now, that is not a sport I know a great deal about. What I did do, though, was go and spend a bit of time with Kieran Riley, who was the leading medal hope for Great Britain. I watched quite a lot of BMX freestyle on YouTube and things like that, and certainly watched some of the previous Olympics where Declan Brooks and Charlotte Worthington had won medals. And I was lucky with the BMX freestyle. I'd done a radio series with Charlotte Worthington and Declan Brooks and spent some time with them. They won medals in Tokyo. Declan didn't qualify this time, and Charlotte did qualify but didn't reach the final. And so I'd basically got them to tell me everything that they possibly could about their sport. And then when I was dispatched to the BMX freestyle, I knew that I would have a decent idea of what I could do. Now, I can't identify all those tricks. I'm not like, if you watch the skateboarding, I got to an Ollie 360 was about as big as I managed to do when I was a skateboarder many years ago. I can't identify the tricks, but I knew that they would have a run of about a minute, and I knew that they would have a second run of about a minute. So I knew that I needed to have 2 minutes worth of broadcasting. But that was about their background, what they'd done before, how they qualified, and then I knew I'd be able to call the scores. So with the Tom Daley diving medal, I did a lot of diving because the diving and athletics venues were next to each other. I knew that Tom Daley and Noah Williams would have 6 dives in the competition, so I knew that the radio station would be coming to me 6 times, and so I needed 6 things to say, if you like. That wasn't just repeating what I'd already said. So I had 6 points, and I got that from interviewing both divers before. So one of the things, I knew they didn't train together. Tom trained in America, which sounds a bit weird for a synchro pair, but they basically didn't train together. They trained individually and then just came together. So that was one of my 6 things, if you like.
Hey, Michael. So obviously there was that video there where you were going through all the TalkSport broadcasters like covering the events, but my questions to you, like more individually, so through all the events that you were at and covering for TalkSport, what would you say was the best atmosphere you experienced and the coverage that you're most proud of when you were there?
I'm proud that we did it, and I'm proud that we did it and we did it well, because I think there was a lot of people that thought we were going to be crap, and probably people that hadn't listened to the radio station. So I remember when TalkSport won cricket rights from the BBC, and everyone just said, "This is it. The world's going to stop spinning. The country's just going to go dark because Test Match Special aren't now going to be broadcasting the cricket." And I was like, "You've got to give these people a chance. You haven't even heard any of it yet." And I knew that a lot of people would be very set to say, "Look, you're not going to do this as well as the BBC." And we, as we were saying earlier, we wanted to do it in our own way and our own style. Because I cover a lot of track and field and athletics, it made sense for me to be the kind of athletics reporter of the evenings, and that was obviously on our coverage was a huge part of what we did. We were live at the athletics in the stadium for every night, 9 nights of the track and field coverage. So I'm really proud of that. And I met in the build-up to the Olympic Games an athlete called Georgia Bell. Now, Georgia was a very talented young athlete, had a scholarship to go to uni in America, but got away from the sport. And during the pandemic, she started doing park runs, and she rediscovered her love of the sport. At the age of 30, she got picked up again by her former coach. And I got to know her a little bit in the 6 months, and I just had this feeling that she was going to do something at the Olympic Games. I mean, when I first started chatting to her, she was like, "I'd really like to be selected for the team. That's my ambition, is to be selected." And then she got selected, and then she was like, "I'd really like to reach the final." And then actually she won a bronze medal. And people don't talk about her because obviously Keely Hodgkinson won a gold and Katarina Johnson-Thompson. But having got to know Georgia over that 6 months and to see her win that bronze medal was for me a real highlight. Men's 100 metres final, obviously everyone gets really amazed by that. That was probably the best in terms of atmosphere. In our interview position, and where I was, there were 60 TV crews and 20 radio crews, so there was 80 different interview positions. Suddenly there was a lot of volunteers and there was a lot of medics suddenly in that interview. If I'd had a medical episode in Paris, I'd have wanted it to be at that moment, because there was a good 30 or 40 paramedics hanging around just while the men's 100 metres final was about to take place. I also knew that when Noah Lyles won it, it was very unlikely he was going to stop and do an interview with me, having had 60 TV interviews, and I was radio number 19 of 20. So I thought he's unlikely to stop and do interview number 59 with me. So I thought, how do I get a Noah Lyles interview after he wins the men's 100 metres? So what I did was I'd worked out that there was a TV crew, because after my position, after our 20, there was then like this bun fight zone where anyone could just dive in that had rights. So there was the 60 interview positions that had positions, and then there was just a bun fight zone. So I'd worked out that there was a TV crew from Noah Lyles' hometown in the bun fight zone. And I thought, if Noah Lyles gets to this point and is going to stop and speak to anyone else, it will be the TV crew from his hometown who he knows and knows him and has been covering his career forever. So I positioned myself in the bun fight zone next to the TV crew from his hometown. And then he did stop to speak to his hometown broadcaster, and I was able to grab a quick interview with him afterwards as well.
Yeah, Michael, thank you for coming.
Thank
In
you.
this industry, a lot of the early roles that are so crucial to the development of young journalists are unpaid, and this of course creates a barrier to those who can't afford to take on that sort of commitment. How do you think the industry should address this and create a more inclusive way of operating?
You're absolutely right, and I do quite a lot of things like this with students, and one of the things I always say to people is you have to at some point put a value on yourself, because there will be people that want to take advantage of you, and they will say to you that experience is vital here, but if they are making money out of what you are doing, then you should be making money. And I wouldn't ever bring a student in or a young person in, and alongside this I run a video production company, and we always have young trainees, but we always pay them something because we're getting money for it, so you should be getting money for it. It's a really difficult moment to decide when to do that. And I actually went and did the London Olympics. I didn't get paid for it. So I just took a chance. I was working for this regional radio station with Darren, and I knew that I wanted to do it. I knew that there was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but the radio station boss said, we've got no budget for you. And so I stayed on sofas with people I knew in London. It actually cost me money to do the London Olympics, but obviously in the long run it worked out. So what I would say is that try and, where you can, go and work for reputable broadcasters, and I know you have terrific links with News UK and Talk Sport, because experience is really important and it's necessary. And I worked for a radio station for free for quite some time at the beginning, but at some point you're going to have to just put your foot down and go, look, if you're making money out of me, then I want to make some money. It might not be, I got £3 an hour back in the 90s, that was what I was earning. It might not be a full rate yet, but you should put some value on yourself, and it's a tough moment when you have to make that decision. But that's why I think it's better if you're working with organisations like News UK, they will make that decision for you and they'll make the right one.
Okay, so that's been a fantastic presentation. So please can you thank Michael for coming to Jones and Media Week today.